pre-Thanksgiving show here on FM News Talk 97.1 Saturday mornings with Tobler. And we can always count on Kelly to make sure that we keep it light and fun from time to time. And little Adam Sandler, their classic bit. That's funny. But it's not always light, and it's not always full of mirth, because just a couple of weeks ago there was a terrible attack using a truck, as a Home Depot rental truck, as a weapon, and with scores killed and injured in total. And we had a vigorous discussion here on the air, and many folks maintain that there is no such thing as moderate Islam, that there is no such thing as authentic moderation and reformed Islam, that in fact those who claim to be moderates and reformed Muslims are actually just tacit supporters, and in some case deceptive supporters of radical jihadism. And so to help us sort that out, none better than Dr. Judy Jasar, a medical doctor and founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. How you doing, Judy? Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm sure this is a critique that you've heard over and over. I mean, we had many callers who said, look, in the Quran, of course, these are folks who probably can't read the original language of the Quran, and they're looking at translations, and we know how, whether it's the Bible or any translation anywhere, there's always, there's the authentic original language, and then there's the translative language. But many people have been concerned that, there's some language out there that apparently says, Zudi, that it's okay to deceive the infidel. And many people think that so-called moderates like you, self-proclaimed moderates, and reformers and anti-Islamists are really just part of the grand conspiracy to make the whole world a caliphate, and on and on and on. You've heard it. How do you answer those criticisms? Because it was vigorous and it was visceral. It really was.
Yeah, I think first I would tell them I'm not here to apologize for my faith. I think they're right in the fact that the establishment of the Muslim community, the leaders of large movements of hundreds of millions of people, this is not simply a small problem. I'm not going to minimize it. You've got the Islamic Republic of Iran run by a suprematist, fascist theocrats of the Khomeinists. You've got Saudi Arabia run by Wahhabi radicals. You've got Qatar, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and then you have huge viral movements of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, yes, I would tell them of the 1.6 billion people that are Muslim, you probably got 300 to 500 million that are part of the problem, which not necessarily all militants, but they all are in the same underbelly. I would say it's worse than the Cold War. In the Cold War, we knew the Soviets were the problem, but we also knew that global communism, be it Chinese communism or communism in South America, wherever it might be, were not our allies. They were part of the underbelly of what fed Soviet ideology. So, similarly, I recognize that. Now, having said that, Christianity just had its 500-year anniversary on that same day of this attack in Manhattan on October 31st of its Reformation. And then there was a second Reformation, which was that of Jefferson and Locke especially, and those who separated church and state and said, the theocrats are not going to run society. We're finally going to understand what it means in the Bible to run under Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God. So I would tell them that, yes, the Muslim population has been asleep, but those of us who are reformists have been marginalized, ignored by the West as irrelevant, but also tortured, imprisoned, decimated by the power structures and the establishment of the Islamic community globally, that we really haven't even had a chance to get a voice. The voice of Muslims globally is dominated by the petro-Islam, the billion-dollar industry, the $100 billion industry that has been spreading the word of political Islamic State ideology. And what's their strategy? If their strategy is to win the war for freedom and liberty globally, then you're not going to be able to convert a quarter of the world's population. And if you can't, then you got to work with those who share your values of universal human rights. And we exist. They went to the streets in the Middle East and in Egypt and Tunisia to fight the Islamist movements, and sometimes they win and other times they're losing.
Yeah, it was ironic, wasn't it, going back to 2009 and the Green Revolution in Iran. That was a chance for, I think, a major change in that entire region. And Obama blew it in that instance. We've talked with Waleed Faris about that. And I wonder now whether a new move, a new approach, a new strategy initiated by Donald Trump when he had his big visit to Saudi Arabia, basically calling on Middle Eastern governments, and you call out Saudi Arabia as being a part of the problem and not being self-policing. Do you think that that's going to gain any traction? I mean, is there a growing realization that they're going to have to clean up their own house in terms of those in Middle East Islam that see the problem and need to fix it, or do you think it's all just talk and sound bites?
Well, that question is why we need your listeners, why we need Americans to get re-engaged. Is there's a schizophrenia to the approach in Washington. On the one hand, President Trump, bless his heart, in the campaign, talked about getting a commission on radical Islam, talked about the importance of calling out the ideology. It was one of the reasons people took him at his word, because he was open about the problem. He wasn't apologizing for it. But then he goes and a couple months ago opens a Star Trek type counterterrorism center in Riyadh, which is like opening an anti-drug counter-drug center in Colombia. And we also handed the Saudis a $150 billion program of new and more fortified arms. Now, I'll tell you, I understand what that's all about. It's about restabilizing the Middle East with the problems with Iran and trying to push back against the Shia radical belligerents, if you will. But we basically have reset the clock now back to the 50s. And Obama had abandoned the entire 20th century and handed the Middle East to the Khomeinists. So President Trump got us at least back to the stability of the 50s and 60s almost. We just saw a coup in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago. But the bottom line is, I think strategically we need a whole-of-society approach where Americans say, you know what, we need to work with our real allies, which are the feminist groups, the civil society groups that share ideas. We need to have the president, just like Reagan talked about the prisoners of conscience in the Soviet Union, mention Solzhenitsyn, mention Nathan Sharansky. Our president needs every day from the White House to mention prisoners of conscience in Saudi Arabia and Iran, in Egypt and elsewhere. And we need to see that disruption through revolutions. It might set some steps backwards, but ultimately the only way forward, if you're ever going to get rid of this ideology, the mafia of Islamic governments will never allow it to happen. There's a reason in Syria we needed to have American jets fly, French jets and others to get rid of ISIS, because Assad would never have done that. Russia would never have done that. Russia actually allowed Chechnyan militants to flow into Syria to even further legitimize the military regime and chemical weapon use of the Assad regime. So the change, the disruption might create a lot more chaos, but revolutions are going to be the only way forward. Just like in the West, you had many revolutions after the Christian Reformation that ultimately set the groundwork for the political environment that allowed true modernization and enlightenment.
We're talking with Dr. Judy Jasar, who, by the way, served in the United States military as, I understand, a lieutenant in the Office of Internal. Were you an internist there for Congress as well?
Yeah, I was on the USS El Paso, and my highest rank was as a lieutenant commander. And then I was a physician to Congress. The clinic that takes care of the members of Congress and Supreme Court justices is a Navy clinic, and that was my last assignment.
There you go. So there's no greater, show of patriotism and putting one's, stethoscope where their mouth is than what Dr. Jasar has done. American Islamic Forum for Democracy, AIFdemocracy.org is the website, AIFdemocracy.org, and Dr. Judy Jasar, at Dr. Judy Jasar is the Twitter handle. What should Americans lobby for, support in terms of legislative and statutory initiatives in a free and open society to try to avoid the radicalization of young male Muslims in America? Because these people come here. Yeah, when I do want to talk about the whole vetting process and the whole lottery and how we need to talk about, how we get that straight, this diversity lottery that, no less than probably 5, according to the Trump administration, 5, terrorists from foreign lands have come here under that plan. But what should we do? We can't go in and close down mosques. We can't have cameras 24/7, put wires on imams, can we? What is the right thing to do, Dr. Jasar? I mean, you're a person who advocates democracy. You defended it in the military. Where's the right balance there? How do we prevent this from happening? The radicalization of young males.
Yep. the right balance is three things. Number one is we need to recognize that there's short-term whack-a-mole approaches and there's a long-term. The short-term approach we've been doing actually very well, which is to look for those who are getting ready to put belts around their waist, that are militant, that want to commit acts of violence. Homeland Security and others have been doing as well as I think is humanly possible. We've had the short-term approach globally where we decimate. Now we have a president that's allowing our DOE to decimate ISIS and win the war against these militant groups and not allow havens to exist in any country for these militant groups. But that's a short-term policy. Long-term, we've not had any long-term policy. So we need a whole-of-society strategy that would involve two other points. Number one, we need to stop with this CVE. If your listeners talk to media, talk to their congressmen and women, talk to universities, you'll find that the central approach right now to radical Islam is what's called CVE, countering violent extremism. That's what the Saudis talk about. That's what we talk about. The UN talks about, Homeland Security. What is that? It needs to shift to CVI, which is countering violent Islamism. Once we start shifting it to countering the ideology, the precursor ideologies of the militants, then we'll start to have better marginalizing of the radicals. The third thing is we need to stop the countering part, which is simply to say, oh, we're against this, we're against that. It's sort of like countering drunk driving. That doesn't work if you don't deal with the alcoholism and say what you're for. So we need a program that embraces Muslims that are for liberty, for universal rights, for free speech. We have a Muslim Reform Movement declaration that's 2 pages that lists the ideas that Muslims should not only be against, but what they should be for. One of the reasons I joined the Navy is the only thing I would die for is America. And yet our strategy currently says that, well, anyone who condemns terror must be on our side. Well, there's a lot of Muslim communists, socialists, autocrats that are also against ISIS that are not for what we are for. So we need to start working with youth programs and academics, universities, to work with ideas that we're for, and that's what our Muslim Reform Movement's about, and I think that needs to be part of whole-of-society approach.
So it takes a lot of courage on the part of people like you and folks that agree with you. But again, it's a courageous thing, and I imagine you come under a lot of persecution from so-called establishment moderates, because I don't view you as what I would call an establishment moderate, who are in many cases, I think, tacit supporters of radicalism. But that's another discussion. Do you get a lot of heat from other Muslims?
I get heat from the establishment, like you just said, from the Islamists that want to use terms like Islamophobia, which is a term that I reject. They use that term because the Middle East government concocted it back 30, 40 years ago because they didn't want the West criticizing Islam. They think the faith itself should be insulated from criticism. So Islamophobia is a cunning way of these Islamist groups to prevent any public criticism or discourse about the faith. So, yeah, the Islamist groups despise the fact that I, show that the emperor has no clothes and is actually theocrats, even though they're living here in America, and that it's not the West's fault. It's not the conspiracy theory of the day's fault, like the anti-Semitic trope that they push forward about conspiracy theories of blaming the Jews, blaming Israel, and other things. And in fact, I hold them to account. Now, people who know me and read my stuff can't say that I'm anti-Islam. I'm very conservative in my family values and my practice of my faith. And so that's why you'll find most of the time they simply try to ignore us. But sometimes you'll see locally in Phoenix and elsewhere, they just viscerally get quite agitated about our work.
Well, and I'm reading a quote from the Quran on your website. Believers, conduct yourselves with justice and bear true witness before God, even if it be against yourselves, your parents, or your kin. Just for the last couple of minutes we have here, Rich has a call. And Rich, you're on with Dr. Judy Jasar. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tobler. You invited me to call back 2 weeks ago on anti-Islam, and the only.
And I ask you to be civil and respectful because I think Dr. Jasar is willing to engage in a healthy and lively debate. But I hope we can keep it civil and respectful here. So go ahead.
Well, we'll do our best. Thank you, Dr. Jasar, and thank you, Dr. Tobler. I am anti-Islam. I think the only solution is to have no Islamic influence in the Western cultures. There is no form of Islam which does not represent the antithesis of all that's Western. I'd like to preserve my civilization, my religion, my tradition, my folkways, even my race, for my children and grandchildren. You made a couple of points that are actually just flat wrong. Respectfully, there is not 1.6 billion Muslims. There's about 1 billion. And in some of the countries where Islamic Sharia prevails, they inflate those numbers by counting pagans, Christians, Hindus, and so forth as their own, and of course children, which should not be considered anything until they're of the age of wisdom. So no, I don't buy any of this. There's an avenue. There is no possible reconciliation between liberty and Islam. It is the very distinct and absolute antithesis of liberty as it's developed in the West over 2,500 years. So, as the Muslims,
what's your strategy? Quickly, what would be your strategy then to protect America and advance liberty globally?
Any adult who acknowledges or adheres to any version of Islam, and there is no moderate version of Islam. And by the way, even if there was a quote moderate version of Islam, you wouldn't say, okay, well, there's some moderate Nazis. Not to say that you're a Nazi, Dr. Jasar. That's not the point. I'm hearing what you're saying. You would not say about an ideology or philosophy which was the antithesis of yours. Well, there's a moderate version, so many may be compromised, or many may lay in wait, and many may pretend to be libertarians and then pro-American, and then within a generation or two, like as has happened everywhere, no exception, I'd like you to provide one if you could, at any point in history, 1,400 years, whether it be Polynesia, Indonesia, all the way to Morocco, or little pockets of Argentina, where once Muslims prevail preponderantly, liberty is annihilated. There are no exceptions. There have been no exceptions. And all these things you're describing, I want everyone to hear me, all these things Dr. Jasar is describing, and he may believe this himself, have been used as a Trojan horse for 1,400 years.
So
we're gonna
So Rich, Rich, I get it. It's the Trojan horse challenge to Dr. Jasar's thesis and proposition. Okay, go ahead, Judy. You got the last word.
Yeah, I think that I gave them an opportunity to give me a solution, and many of these folks who are proudly anti-Islam have no solution. They simply want to have a cataclysmic battle against every Muslim on the planet, which is not going to end well. We can get into arguments about population numbers and get into arguments about what happened in 628 CE and other things. We can't even agree if chemical weapons were being used in Damascus a month ago, let alone trying to agree what happened with tribes in the Saudi Arabia area back in the 7th century at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So all I can tell you is that if I didn't exist, if I'm a figment of Islam, the narrative you're giving, the Saudis would pay money to continue to advocate, because you're giving a narrative that is there's only one Islam. You may call it militant. They call it their Islam, the Wahhabi Islam, and there is no diversity of thought. So why Islam cannot go through the same reformation, the same marginalization of the theocrats, I don't understand. And secondly, I think you just haven't spoken to many Muslims who came here to embrace freedom and liberty and why we would die for this country, why we believe in the Constitution. Tunisia proved you wrong. Tunisia and Nahda, the Islamist party, in December 2014 was defeated in the ballot box. You had 10 million Muslims go to the streets in Egypt. Now, there had to be a coup in order to marginalize the Brotherhood, but they were rejected. The Islamists were rejected. The Green Revolution also rejects your thoughts. So I'm not sure. Again, I asked them about strategy. A lot of these people simply want to put a wall around America, and I don't think you can do that. Ultimately, 56 countries are run by Muslim majorities. Are we going to allow them all to descend into Iranian, Saudi-type theocracies? That caliphate would ultimately want to destroy us, as you said. And that version of Islam is not one that's commensurate with a peaceful planet. And I think the Muslim populations, especially in America, need some tough love, but also need to navigate that center path of advancing liberty. And I think it's possible.
Wow, brilliant exposition of your position and your stance, and I think it would behoove all of us to engage in these discussions. And I thank you for engaging the caller and making such a brilliant defense of where you're at, because I think eventually folks are going to realize that, if nothing else, from a pragmatic standpoint, as you said, we're not going to. Heck, We have discussions, Judy, about rounding up 12 million illegals, and people realize that's not going to happen. What are we going to do? Round up every Muslim in America, including Dr. Judy Jasar, and deport them? I don't think that's going to happen. We've got to find a way forward, and I think yours is a brilliant and well-thought and well-exposed way here. Again, it's AIFdemocracy.org. Dr. Judy Jasar, thanks for your appearance today. We really very much appreciate you. Good luck in the future.
Anytime.
Thank you, sir. Take care. There he is. All right.